Hello and welcome to the TankSpot Bastion of Twilight raid guide. My name is Aliena, and in this video I'll show you everything you have to know about the Ascendant Council, the third encounter in this new raid instance. We completed this fight with 2 tanks, 6 healers and 17 DPS, but similar raid configurations may work just as well. The Council is a 3-phase encounter and you face a total of 5 opponents. In the first phase, you're up against Ignatius, a Fire Elemental Ascendant Lord, and Philudius, an Ice Elemental Ascendant Lord. In the second phase, you face off against Arion, who is an Air Elemental Ascendant Lord, and Terastra, an Earth Elemental Ascendant Lord. In the third phase, all 4 entities combine into an Elementium monstrosity, which combines all 4 elements in one. While the first 2 phases require near perfect execution, the third phase is definitely a soft and rage DPS test. As soon as one Lord in both phase 1 and 2 hits 25%, you'll trigger the next phase, but you want to make sure that both Lords are equally low before doing this each time, as the Elementium monstrosity starts out with a combined amount of health of all 4 opponents. In short, getting all 4 Lords as close to 25% as you can gives you the best chance of defeating this encounter. Ignatius and Philudius will be your first 2 opponents, and as you can probably tell as soon as you engage them, their abilities are meant to counter each other. Ignatius should be tanked on one side of the room, surrounded by a tank and your melee, while Philudius should be tanked away from the raid, with ranged raid members loosely spread out across the room. This is because of one of Philudius' abilities, Glaciate, which deals frost damage to your entire raid but deals less damage the further away you are from him. As such, your ranged raid members should be assigned to DPS him while your melee are safe on Ignatius. You'll soon notice that each Lord occasionally puts a debuff on random raid members. Philudius has Heart of Ice and Ignatius has Burning Blood. These deal increasing damage to the target but are very vital to the fight, as they give nearby raid members a buff that increases their damage done to the opposing Lord. Players with Burning Blood should make sure to run through the ranged raid members to give them increased damage on Philudius, and players with Heart of Ice need to join the melee pile to give them increased damage on Ignatius. These can be dispelled, but you should give it 10 to 20 seconds before doing so. Heart of Ice is especially important whenever Ignatius is about to cast his most devastating ability, Aegis of Flame. This gives him a shield that absorbs 1,000,000 damage and he'll start channeling Rising Flames, which deals increasing fire damage to every raid member. To interrupt Rising Flames, his shield needs to be burned down as soon as possible. Letting too many ticks of Rising Flames go off can easily result in a raid wipe. If needed, have ranged help out with the shield, but make sure that they go right back to Philudius afterwards so you can bring their health down equally. Ignatius will also occasionally leap at a random target, which knocks everyone around the impact point away. On his way back to his tank, he'll leave a trail of flame on the ground. While I always preach not to stand in the flames, this one's actually useful. This is why. Philudius has a water bomb ability, which basically looks like small water missiles flying through the air. When they hit a raid member, he'll get a waterlock debuff, which reduces movement speed. Running through Ignatius' flame trail clears the waterlock debuff and needs to be done by everyone affected. Shortly after casting the water bombs, Philudius will cast aforementioned Glaciate, and any player that still has a waterlock debuff at that time will get frozen in an ice block and take extreme amounts of damage. This is healable, but it's not something you want to happen. Philudius' last ability is Hydro Lance, which deals big single target damage to a random target and should be interrupted. Make sure your ranged raid members and the Philudius tank watch out for this. Ignatius' last ability is Flame Torrent, which is a channeled cone AoE spell that deals major damage. To counter this, don't be in front of his face unless you're the tank. To recap, in phase 1, interrupt Rising Flames by burning down the Aegis, power up your raid members appropriately by running near them when you have a debuff, and clear the waterlock debuff by running through the flame trail. Once you get one Lord to 25%, the next phase will trigger. It's vital that both Lords hit 25% at about the same time. Phase 2 will greet you with Arion and Terastra, which also have mechanics that counter each other. Ranged raid members are more effective on Arion as he likes to teleport around the room, so leave your melee on Terastra. As soon as the fight starts, Arion will summon a Cyclone that'll move through the room, and Terastra will summon a Gravity Well. Hitting the Cyclone will give you sort of Levitate, while standing in the Gravity Well will give you a grounded debuff and clear your Levitate. Both of these are very important as both Arion and Terastra have very devastating ultimate abilities that deal about 100k damage. They are alternating casting these about once per minute. Terastra has Quake, which can be countered by getting Levitate from the Cyclone, and Arion has Thundershock, which is cancelled by getting grounded from the Gravity Well. If you don't have the right debuff at the time either of these are cast, you're very likely to die. The Wells and Cyclones are summoned in random spots around the room and like to move on top of each other, so make sure to get the appropriate debuff early. They always alternate in their casts, so if you just survived a Quake, get grounded to survive the impending thunderstorm. There's one exception to the get the debuff as soon as possible rule, and it's called Lightning Rod. Arion will randomly bestow 3 players with this debuff, and they'll have a yellow arrow over their heads. Players with lightning rods need to get out of the raid immediately and hug a wall away from anybody else, since Arion will cast chain lightning at anyone affected with lightning rod after 15 seconds. If any lightning rod is still near people at that time, you'll probably have a few deaths. If you have lightning rod and it comes down to having the choice between being near anyone else or not getting your appropriate grounded or levitate debuff, always leave the raid. You can survive a quake or a thundershock, but if you're firing off a chain lightning in the raid, there will be dead people. Almost as important is Tarastra's Hardened Skin ability, which makes him deal double damage and take half damage. This cast can and should be interrupted whenever possible, but if you fail to do so, have your ranged help out on Tarastra to burn his shield down. Lastly, Tarastra will occasionally cast Eruption, which will look like a few spikes burrowing in the ground, and after a few seconds the spikes will impale anyone still in the area for about 50k damage. Melee should be aware of this, although it's not the end of the world to get hit by it. Again, the goal in Phase 2 is to bring both lords to 25% at the same time. If you execute this right, your Elementium monstrosity should rise up with about 25% health left, which translates to approximately 18 million health. Phase 3 is the burn phase, and any kind of bloodlust should be saved for this. The monstrosity will consistently spawn water puddles at his feet. They kinda work like the file on the Lich King, except the puddles expand when the monstrosity stands in them, not your raid members. Aim to keep the monstrosity towards the middle of the room so your casters don't have to consistently move to keep up with it. The middle area will be covered in puddles at the end of the fight, but that way you get the most DPS on it. Throughout the whole phase, the monstrosity will use electric instability, which is basically a chain lightning that deals more damage the longer the phase goes on. Eventually your raid will just die to this, so you need to kill the monstrosity before electric instability becomes overwhelming. It has 2 more abilities that it will use occasionally, Lava Seed and Gravity Crush. Lava Seed looks like little flares of fire hitting the ground, and shortly after they do so, they'll explode in a little fire patch. This is the bad kind of fire, don't stand in it. Gravity Crush will lift 3 players up into the air and trap them in a gravity bubble. They cannot act during this and will take major damage in the bubble, so healers need to concentrate on them. When released, they'll fall to the ground and also take fall damage when they hit it. It's easy to let people die in this, but important not to. With current gear level, you need every bit of DPS you can get. If you have enough DPS to defeat the monstrosity before your raid collapses, it's more or less a tank and spank phase. This might sound like a complex encounter, but since the abilities all play off of each other, it'll be a lot easier once you engage it. Good luck and have fun. I've attached the whole encounter so you can see how we dealt with the various mechanics in detail. As you can see, we just pulled Ignatius and Philudius here. We're tanking Ignatius to the left, Philudius is to the right. They're not as separated as they should be, but we're getting on that in a minute here. Now, Ignatius is going to start out with his sleep here. Sometimes this actually bugs out for us. I contacted a GM about it. They said they're aware of the issue, so if you do not have the Trail of Fire, you're pretty much screwed, just as a FYI. Now, this is our first waterlogged, so Philudius is about to cast Glaciate, and at the same time Ignatius is casting his Aegis. Now the first time in this encounter is pretty much happens at the same time, so do make sure you concentrate on the Aegis and interrupt it. We had the range switch over just for the Aegis, and then they switched back immediately so they could keep working on Philudius. Now the Ice Guy is usually behind a bit in DPS for us because of this, so we do make sure that we get them both low. We stop the DPS on the Fire Guy except for the Aegis at the end, just so we can get them both to 25% at the end. Now we've had a lot of trouble with the debuffs getting to the right pile in time, so do make sure to call the debuffs out on Vent, it helps a lot. Also, the ice debuff on melee is really important when Aegis is about to come up, so do make sure that if there's both an ice and a fire debuff in the melee, they cancel each other out, so do make sure to dispel the fire debuff and leave the ice debuff on, just so the melee can get the ice debuff and dispel the Aegis. The debuffs last about 30 seconds, so once you run into a pile, they're gonna have it for 30 seconds unless in that pile of fire debuff spawns and the fire debuff is going to override the ice debuff. And vice versa, obviously. Also make sure to get rid of your waterlogged, so important, you cannot turn into an ice block. Now we're about to trigger phase 2 here, you see they're both low at 25, and here we go. Now we have Arion and Terrestra here. Arion is about to spawn his little Cyclone. Now the first big ability that always happens in phase 2 was Quake, so everybody would get the Cyclone immediately upon seeing it. The cyclones and the gravity welts do tend to move on top of each other. Well, the cyclone moves on top of the gravity well, so sometimes this can cause issues since the gravity well actually sucks you in when you're on top of it and the cyclone bumps you back. So this can cause some moving issues. Just be aware of that and try not to run into a pile of both of them, because you might not be able to get back out in time. Something we had a lot of trouble with in Phase 2 is also the lightning rods, getting them out of the raid. Now, a lot of people would attempt to get the right debuff with having the lightning rod on, which didn't work out too well, because if you're in the raid with a lightning rod on, you're probably going to get somebody killed. So it's absolutely vital that you move out. Just don't think about it. You probably have enough time to get your right debuff afterward, so this is a lot more important. See, now you can move back in, even though you still have the arrow. After the chain lightning goes off, you're fine. You can kind of make Phase 2 a little easier with hardened skin. When you burn the shield from hardened skin, Draster actually takes a lot of extra damage. So if you push the shield over at around 25%, he takes some extra damage that pushes him below 25, which gives you a lower percentage on the Elementium monstrosity that spawns. However, this is a little tough to accomplish, so if you're not that coordinated, just do it normally. Now I get Lightning Rod again here, but we're actually on the phase change to Phase 3, so you see the fight's a lot quicker than my explanation made it sound, but there's so many abilities that I had to go over, so sue me. Anyway, this is Phase 3. The Elementium monstrosity is about to spawn here. We pretty much executed it perfectly. We had it start at 25%. Now this phase gives us a lot of issues because most people are still in blues, mostly blues, so we had trouble meeting the DPS requirement. Now what helped a lot was having the monstrosity in the middle of the room, because before that we had it move outside of the room and the DPS always had to move to keep up with it, which wasn't so good. We just never managed to get it down. We always wiped it like 2%. So once we changed it to having it stand in the middle, we actually pretty much one-shot it. Now as you can see, the lightning keeps increasing in number. I don't think it's a damage that increases, I think it's a number and the chaining that does. So it gets tougher and tougher to heal as the fight goes on. Now you can see the fire bombs are about to come down. Just angle your camera up and you can avoid it real easily. They're not tough to avoid. What is tough is keeping people up that get the little bubble and get lifted up into the air. See right there, I think 2 people die in this one just because we don't have the rate frame set up for it at this point, which you should probably do just as a tip, to show the debuff just so you can heal people easily. Now this is the end of the fight, and as you can see we just have the water pools everywhere, but they're really little because our tank keeps moving the monstrosity, so that's something you should definitely do. The lightning is just annihilating people at this point, and now healers get lifted up too, so there's even less healing going on. See all the lightning going out? Yeah, it's bad. But there it dies, so we actually managed to kill it here, even though we almost die in the process. But as I said, that's just a gear thing, it's a DPS thing. Either you have it or you don't. But we did in blues. Mainly blues after like a week of farming, so it's not that tough to actually get the gear for it. So I hope this helped you in some form or another, and good luck with the encounter.